Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following.
Back to school is just around the corner, and police have tips on how to keep our community safe when driving. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is asking all of the UCP leadership candidates to sign an important pledge. Chris Sims from the CTF has the details. And the United Nations is making an appeal for $160 million to help those in Pakistan deal with the devastating floods.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Safety is top of mind for many people, including the Lethbridge Police Service, as students head back to school. The LPS is reminding motorists to slow down in school and playground zones once again. Sergeant Danny Lumnus of the Traffic Response Unit has some tips for motorists when they're driving near zones where children are and the stiff fines that will follow if they don't slow down to obey traffic signs.
It can range from $80 to $500 if you're doing over and around 50 kilometers an hour, or if it's over 50, it can be automatic court appearance. Just slow down, pay attention. Again, everybody's got to get used to the busy flow of traffic in the area again, and don't take your eyes off the road because you don't know what's going to happen in these areas. Some kids just don't quite understand.
Starting on Wednesday, traffic enforcement in school zones will begin once the Holy Spirit Catholic School Division welcomes back students. A fire on the north side of Lethbridge caused considerable damage to a home on Monday evening. 18 firefighters arrived at the scene and crews were able to contain the blaze that was on the outside of the house. Lethbridge paramedics transported one person to hospital with non-life-threatening injuries, and one firefighter also sustained minor injuries. The damage is estimated to be at around $175,000, and the fire is still under investigation. Inflation has risen as of late, and that means more people are struggling to pay for the costs of food for their pets. The Alberta SPCA and Lethbridge Community Animal Services handed out free dog and cat food on Tuesday afternoon to members of the community most in need. As BCN's Micah Quinn explains now, a large group made their way to grab some food for their pets.
Thank you. Are you with her? No? Okay.
Pallets of dog and cat food were dropped off and handed out to members of the community by the Alberta SPCA and the Lethbridge Community Animal Services. This was done in the parking lot of the historical Bowman Arts Centre in downtown Lethbridge. Dan Kobe, the communications manager for the Alberta SPCA, says they see people on a regular basis that are struggling to feed their pets.
It was Nestle Purina Pet Care that donated the food to us, so we're very thankful for that. And we knew that Lethbridge was an area of the province that would have a high demand, so we decided to come here first. And as we saw here, obviously, when we arrived in the lineup of people looking for food, that there is absolutely a need and a demand for food in this type of an economy where people are struggling to pay their bills, including feeding their animals.
Skylar Pleward, the director of the Lethbridge Community Animal Services, says he was excited when the Alberta SPCA reached out to collaborate and help give out some much-needed resources to the community.
Hopefully, in turn, that will reduce the amount of calls for service both of our agencies are dealing with, and will reduce the amount of animals coming into the shelter that are stray and not being claimed for financial reasons, or people who are having to surrender to shelters or rescues because they financially can't care for their pets. So there's some options.
Community Animal Services also runs a pet food bank out of the City of Lethbridge Animal Shelter, and whatever food isn't handed out during Tuesday's event will go straight to the food bank program. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is hosting a very special event prior to the UCP leadership debate in Edmonton tonight. Now, to discuss this in more detail is the Alberta Director of the CTF, Chris Sims, who joins us from Edmonton. Chris, what is the special event all about?
Well, it's a very big event. We're getting all of the UCP candidates, or at least asking all the UCP leadership candidates, to sign our Canadian Taxpayers Federation petition pledge. So what that pledge says is, I, as Premier, fill in your name, will never impose a PST and I will not raise taxes. So nice big promise. We're hopeful that we'll get most of the candidates signed on. We're going to be attending the debate in Edmonton this evening, and we're doing it right on site. So nice and convenient for these politicians to swing on by and sign their name on a dotted line. So they're promising to not raise taxes, the ones that already exist, and to not impose a new PST on Albertans.
So what will happen if one of these candidates becomes premier and goes back on his or her word, similar to what transpired when then CPC leader Aaron O'Toole said he would not support a carbon tax, then later did in fact support one?
Aaron O'Toole isn't the leader of the Conservative Party anymore. And one of the big reasons for that is because he broke his promise on the carbon taxes. So he promised us and all of our supporters and everybody watching that he would not impose a carbon tax or levy or fee or whatever wiggly weaselly words that politicians like to use. And then he turned around and he tried campaigning on it. So yeah, he broke that promise and he's no longer the leader of the Conservative Party. So you betcha, we take these pledges very seriously and we're taking these politicians at their word. We're videotaping it, we're photographing it, we're documenting all of it. And if they become premier and try to raise taxes or try to impose a PST, they're going to be seeing a lot of us.
Thanks so much, Chris. That was Chris Sims, Alberta Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, joining us from Edmonton. A recent MNP survey says half of Albertans are $200 away from not being able to afford their bills each and every month. That is the highest percentage of anywhere in Canada. Groceries, including beef, have gone up by almost 30%. Inflation was 8.4% in June, but wages only went up by an average of 3.3%. The Alberta NDP says Albertans need a break, and they need it right now. They're calling on the UCP to implement a fee holiday ahead of tomorrow's first quarter update that is expected to show a multi-billion-dollar surplus.
There are so many ways that the government has piled on costs, and I'll start with some of the most obvious. They could reconvene the House and reverse their decision to increase personal income taxes. This decision in their very first year, a decision that the UCP government made, has piled more than $650 million in additional taxes onto families, and that will hit $1 billion very soon. So we're calling on them to reverse that immediately. They should also reverse their cut to AISH and seniors benefits and the child and family benefit. By removing those provisions in their first budget, the UCP has left people who rely on these vital supports and programs to fall further and further behind.
It appears as though more family physicians are on their way to our city. Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf says this should really help alleviate the need for some who are in dire need of a doctor.
To date, there have been 17 family physicians hired to come to Lethbridge and serve. 4 of them have commenced the first part of that assessment and transition. It is estimated that they will be starting this fall. Those 4, and with the further 13 beginning to come online closer towards the end of the year and into next spring. So 17 would roughly cut that number of people without family doctors in half. So we're not all the way there, but we have definitely turned a corner and we're moving in a very positive direction.
Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf will also discuss how the province is working to address the labour shortage and a number of other sectors. My interview with MLA Neudorf is coming up after Business News. RCMP say they're investigating after Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland was accosted at Grand Prairie City Hall last week. The video posted on Twitter shows a man approaching Freeland, swearing at her and calling her a traitor. Police say physical or verbal actions in person or online may be against the law. If the criminal threshold is not met to lay charges, it examines the threats of an intelligence perspective. The tongue lashing that Freeland received has been widely condemned and criticized by politicians across party lines. Following the Freeland incident in Grand Prairie, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canadians really need to respect each other more. Political reporter Brian Lilly is taking issue with that comment from our Prime Minister. He says Trudeau really needs to practice what he preaches.
Justin Trudeau has not led by example, but he does like to lecture the rest of us. I think that's part of why people are so frustrated. I get that there's anger in the land. I get that there is frustration. I think that we have to watch if we want to put forward our viewpoints and move forward whatever agenda that each of us have. We've got to do it in a way that doesn't alienate other Canadians. But I understand that there is anger, that there is frustration. The Prime Minister doesn't seem to see that, and he only wants respect for those he agrees with rather than those he disagrees with. And that's a major problem.
Mr. Lilly will also discuss a new push on the fertilizer front when it comes to Canadian farmers, and it has nothing to do with emissions. He'll have details coming up in the second half of our program. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Ottawa will be boosting its funding for affordable housing units. Speaking in Kitchener, Ontario, Trudeau said his government will invest more than $2 billion to build 17,000 homes across the country.
When people have stable homes, they can build more stable lives. They can participate and create their communities. They can contribute their skills to businesses and organizations in our economy, and we all benefit from that. For a lot of renters, saving to buy a home is increasingly difficult. Through this new program, we'll work with housing providers to help families go from renting to owning their home. I'm very pleased to say that applications for projects open today.
Close to 11,000 homes will be built through the Affordable Housing Innovation Fund, creating more affordable housing for families. Another church is burned down, this one located in the town of Fort Chipewyan, located north of Fort McMurray. Police say the burning of the 113-year-old Catholic church was a suspicious incident. The Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Church was built by missionaries back in 1909. First responders were first notified by the fire late last week and put out the blaze before it spread to nearby buildings. No injuries were reported, and the investigation is ongoing. First Nation Chief for Athabasca Chipewyan, Alan Adam, said people should not take the frustration out and anger out on the house of the Lord. Police say 3 men died in a fiery crash that closed the Trans-Canada Highway and Yoho National Park for 37 hours. RCMP say the collision just west of the Alberta-BC boundary took place just before 7 a.m. on Sunday. The preliminary investigation suggests that westbound semi-truck hauling cattle crossed over the center line and hit an eastbound semi-truck hauling lumber. All but one of the cows also died. The highway reopened around 8 p.m. on Monday night. Grieving family members tossed flowers into a deep concrete pit on a rural road on the edge of Barrie, Ontario. Many were mourning the loss of 6 young adults who died in a crash there over the weekend. A group of women in Barrie have launched a GoFundMe campaign, hoping to raise around $60,000 for the families of the 6 victims. So far, around $50,000 have been raised. The 3 were killed in a single vehicle collision in the south end of Barrie, north of Toronto, and were found early Sunday morning. Officials from the city of Barrie say the site of the crash was closed off for construction since the spring. The Manitoba government says it will be waiving the entry fee to provincial parks over the Labor Day long weekend. Parks Minister Jeff Wharton says this weekend will begin the transition from summer into fall, but there's still lots of time to take advantage of the parks. Vehicle permits will not be required from Friday to Monday. Regular fees, however, will still apply to the campgrounds. Meanwhile, in Saskatchewan, the government there says it will be expanding a program which promotes positive mental health in students. It says it is spending an additional $800,000 this year and next to add 5 schools to its mental health capacity building initiative. The schools will be selected and will be located in Prince Albert, La Ronge, Weyburn, and Yorkton. The program promotes mental health in children, youth, and families who interact with kids by focusing on prevention, early identification, and intervention. The United Nations and Pakistan have appealed for $160 million in emergency funding for close to 500,000 displaced victims of record-breaking floods. The monsoon and subsequent flooding have claimed more than 1,150 lives since mid-June and have destroyed more than 300,000 homes.
बरसात असां उते हर शइ गुम करे बच्चा कढे लटा वधे बच्चन खे कतार करे मस निकता आहियूं कतार करे बच्चन खे मस पुगायूं सवारी बि कान मैं त चाहे त सवारी हुजे किरायो घर ई लुड़ी वियो.
Supporters of a prominent Iraqi Shiite cleric fired rocket-propelled grenades into Iraq's Green Zone as machine gun fire crackled overheard on Tuesday. Officials say 30 people were killed as the political chaos gripping the Mideast nation continues to deepen. The violence began after powerful Shia religious leader Muqtada al-Sadr announced that he would resign from Iraqi politics. This prompted hundreds of his angry followers to storm the government palace, sparking clashes with security forces. Former Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev has died. He was known for ending the Cold War without bloodshed, but failed to prevent the breakup of the Soviet Union back in 1991. Gorbachev signed weapons reduction agreements with the United States and other Western powers to remove the Iron Curtain that divided Europe since the end of the Second World War and helped to bring about the reunification of Germany. Mikhail Gorbachev was 91. Meanwhile, the war between Ukraine and Russia continues. A pastor in Kharkiv, Ukraine, is sharing his story of how his church is partnering with Samaritan's Purse to distribute food to those most in need in his country. He says the ministry is opening doors to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with so many people.
24 февраля рано утром 5 часов утра Харьков начал сильно бомбить. Взрывы начались по всему городу. Да, с того момента, когда началась война, люди потеряли работу, бизнеса были закрыты. Я являюсь пастором церкви Святая Троица. Меня зовут Илья, фамилия Герасим. Да, церковь с 25-го, 24-го началась война, 25-го мы начали кормить горячими обедами, а из этого вышло, что мы ежедневно начали раздавать продуктовые пакеты. Для нас сумка «Самарянин» – это большое благословение, потому что мы планировали уже закрыть нашу работу. Мы за это время раздали больше 300 тысяч продуктовых пакетов, и мы дошли до того, что мы хотели закрыться, потому что не было продуктов. И тут вовремя сумка «Самарянина» позвонили нам и предложили нам свою помощь. Все эти люди, волонтеры, которые подключились здесь к работе, они все пришли сюда разбитые, без надежды, без веры в завтрашний день. Но когда они соприкоснулись к божественной любви, у них появилась надежда, любовь, вера и желание делать все для Господа. Поэтому я считаю, что это Господь во время войны это все сделал.
I think without what the churches have been doing, the crisis that has been going on would be significantly worse. This food means everything for them. It means life for them. It means getting from one day to the next.
Для меня очень важно, поскольку ситуация в стране нестабильна, и сейчас малейшая помощь мне будет как поддержка в жизни.
Christ has called us to sacrifice. The biggest sacrifice is to go where people are and to love on them and to serve them.
В Украине сейчас большое пробуждение, но Бог все зло превращает в добро. Люди обращаются к Богу сейчас. Поэтому там, где беда, там, где боль, там божественная любовь, то Бог здесь. Ни одна война в мире и никакие обстоятельства жизни, они не могут повлиять на веру в Бога, на любовь к Богу и на любовь Божию по отношению к нам.
Great to see God at work in Ukraine. That is wonderful. Well, it was on this day that baseball great Ty Cobb made his baseball debut. The first black astronaut blasts off into space, and late-night talk show host David Letterman moves to CBS. This is Today in History for August the 30th.
August 30th, 1862. During the American Civil War, the Second Battle of Bull Run ends in Manassas, Virginia. Union forces are defeated by the Confederates on the site of the war's first major clash the previous year. 1967. In Washington, the Senate confirms Thurgood Marshall as the first black justice on the U.S. Supreme Court. Years later, Marshall tells students at his alma mater, Howard University, not to rest upon past civil rights achievements.
You can't stand still. You must move. And if you don't move, they will run over you.
1983. Guyon Bluford Jr. becomes the first black astronaut in space, blasting off aboard Space Shuttle Challenger. 1797. Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, the novelist who created the horror story Frankenstein, is born in London. 1905. Baseball's Ty Cobb makes his major league debut with the Detroit Tigers. He hits a double in his first at-bat in a game against the New York Highlanders. The Tigers win 5-3. And 1993.
If you think about it, all I really did was take the summer off.
Completing his move from NBC, talk show host David Letterman debuts on CBS with his Late Show. Today in History, August 30th. Camille Bohannon, The Associated Press.
Well, we had lots of sunshine again today, and it was nice and hot. We may even get close to setting a heat record later this week in southwestern Alberta. Full weather details are coming up. It was another hot one in many parts of southwestern Alberta again today, so we saw close to 30 degrees. Tonight in Lethbridge, it should be mainly clear with a low near 16.
Wednesday, sunny and hot again with a high expected near 34. Thursday, cooling off slightly under a mainly clear sky with a high of 27. Friday, sunshine and a high of 29. A sizzling hot weekend is shaping up so far. Expect sunshine and 35 on Saturday, even hotter with a high of 36 degrees expected on Sunday. And if we get that high, we may even set a new heat record. Labor Day Monday, sunny again with a high of 32. Checking the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 23 degrees and an average low of 8. The highest temperature was 35 degrees set back in 1996, and the record low was 0 in 1952. The sun rose at 6:44 and set at 8:20. Let's see how Wednesday's shaping up across Canada now. It should be mainly sunny and 26 in Victoria, just a few clouds and 26 degrees as well for Vancouver. Calgary had a heat warning today, much of the same picture on Wednesday with a high near 33. Edmonton also had a heat warning today. Tomorrow, just a few clouds and a high of 31. Sunshine and 33 is on tap for Regina on Wednesday. Sunny and 34 for Saskatoon. A clear sky and 30 degrees for Winnipeg. In the central part of the country, there's a good chance of showers developing at 26 for Toronto. Rain at 21 for Ottawa. A severe thunderstorm watch for Montreal with a high expected near 22. In Atlantic Canada, expect rain at 22 in Fredericton. A chance of thunder showers at 24 for Halifax. Rain at 27 for Charlottetown. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, the clouds should clear out and you should see a high of 27 degrees on Wednesday.
Canada's formally launching a challenge of U.S. duties on Canadian softwood lumber. International Trade Minister Mary Ng calls the duties unwarranted and unfair. Ottawa filed the notice of the challenge under the U.S.-Canada-Mexico Trade Agreement's dispute resolution system. Minister Ng says the duties harm Canadian businesses and workers, but also serves as a tax on U.S. consumers who are already dealing with inflation and supply issues. The U.S. cut its anti-dumping and countervailing duty rate in half earlier this month from 17.61 to 8.59%, but Ng says Canada will still fight the measures. The union representing around 1,500 Loomis Express workers in 8 provinces says they've served strike notice. Unifor says the workers will be in a legal strike position just after midnight on Wednesday. The union is negotiating on behalf of workers that include hourly drivers, owner-operators, call center staff, and warehouse workers. They're located across the country, including right here in Alberta. Twitter has lobbed the latest salvo at Elon Musk in a new round of legal filings over the billionaire's aborted plan to buy the social media platform. It comes after Musk filed more paperwork to terminate his agreement to purchase Twitter based on information in a whistleblower complaint filed by Twitter's former head of security. In a separate SEC filing, Twitter responded to what it called Musk's latest purported termination. The company says the filing is based on statements made by a third party that are riddled with inconsistencies and lack important context. Best Buy posted lower fiscal second quarter profits as consumer demand weakened and high costs rippled through its supply chain. It says its net income fell 60% to $306 million US, while revenue dropped 13% to $10.33 billion. The results, however, were above analysts' expectations, which pushed Best Buy shares up by more than 2% in Tuesday trading. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The indices took it on the chin once again today. The TSX was down 323 points to 19,512. The Dow was down 308 points to 31,790. The S&P 500 was down 44 on the day to 3986, and the Nasdaq was down 134 to 11,883. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 476 to 92.32 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 28 cents to 9.05 US. Gold was down a cent to 17.2401 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at 18.42 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $10.97 per bushel, barley's at $8.10, canola's at $18.10, and corn is at $11.68 per bushel. Live cattle were up 95 cents to $142.50. Feeder cattle October contract was up $2.20 to $183.28, and lean hogs October contract was up $1.35 to $93.60. The Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at 76.37 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, RCMP say they are investigating after Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland was accosted at Grand Prairie City Hall last week. The video posted on Twitter shows a man approaching Freeland, swearing at her and calling her a traitor. Police say physical or verbal actions in person or online may be against the law. If the criminal threshold is not met to lay charges, it examines the threats from an intelligence perspective. You know, since that incident with Freeland and Grande Prairie, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canadians need to respect each other more. Political reporter Brian Lilly says Trudeau needs to practice what he preaches, and we'll discuss in more detail shortly. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. Cool off with your canine companion and help support a worthy cause. It's the 7th annual Paws in the Pool at Westminster Outdoor Pool on Monday, September 5th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Dog owners 18 and over are welcome to come and swim with their canine friends. All participating dogs must be well socialized, in good health, and provide proof of current vaccines. Cost is $10 per dog and humans are free. All proceeds will go directly to the care of animals at the Lethbridge and District Humane Society. For details, call the Humane Society at 403-320-8991. Celebrate Recovery is a Christ-centered recovery program for any hurt, hang-up, and habit. This group meets Friday nights at Park Meadows Baptist Church. The evening begins at 7 p.m. with a large group session, followed by small groups at 8 with coffee and dessert at 9. For more information, visit celebraterecovery.ca or call Park Meadows Church office at 403-327-4422. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
A story we recently brought you on Bridge City News was a confrontation a foul-mouthed Grande Prairie resident had with Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland when she visited the Peace region recently here in the province. It was anything but peaceful that day. To discuss this in more detail is political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, joining us once again from Toronto. Brian, many politicians came out and condemned the tongue lashing that Freeland received, and rightly so. But our Prime Minister says Canadians really need to show each other respect. Now, you say he should lead by example, but really he isn't. Why do you say that?
For a lot of reasons, going back to Justin Trudeau's track record. And look, I condemn this foul-mouthed approach to Chrystia Freeland. I'm not a fan of her work, as you know. This goes back to before she was in government. Her book, Plutocrats, I think, puts forward some very dangerous, awful ideas that show that she doesn't understand economics. But, you know, how when we play team sports growing up, whether it's hockey or football or soccer, you learn basic rules like play the ball, not the man, play the puck, not the man, right? You don't go in and attack somebody for who they are. And that's what this guy did. And it was foul-mouthed. It was inappropriate. In as much as I disagree with Chrystia Freeland, that's not how I approach things. And I don't think that's how most Canadians approach things. And so, yeah, it's right to condemn the way that he approached this. We can't even say what this man said on air. We'd be, censured for doing that. You'd be in a lot of trouble. Maybe not me, but you'd be in a lot of trouble. Yeah. So, does that really win people to your cause, whatever it is? And it was unclear what his cause was, other than verbally assaulting Freeland. And he's a big guy. She's a small woman. He's very menacing. But the Prime Minister comes out and he says, well, we need to show respect to each other. Okay, have you been leading by example? The answer is clearly no. And, all the people that, and look, I condemned the issue quickly on Saturday when I heard about it. And then Sunday, the PM comes out and says, we have all got to show each other respect. And I thought, I can give you a very long list, including recent examples of you not showing other people respect. Jody Wilson-Raybould didn't want to interfere in a criminal prosecution case. Well, he fired her for that. Selena Cesar-Chavannes, a Black Liberal MP from the Toronto area, said that, she felt like there was tokenism involved in how the Prime Minister approached politics, especially with issues related to race and ethnicity. And that she was leaving politics. And he yelled and screamed at her, much like this guy did. I don't think he used his foul language, but according to her book, he yelled at her. Melissa Lantsman, conservative Jewish MP, asked questions about the Emergencies Act earlier this year. And Trudeau accused her of standing with people who hold swastika flags. This is a guy who regularly calls people who disagree with him racist, and yet his government hired somebody who holds racist views to teach us about anti-racism. Justin Trudeau has not led by example, but he does like to lecture the rest of us. I think that's part of why people are so frustrated. I get that there's anger in the land. I get that there is frustration. I think that we have to watch if we want to put forward our viewpoints and move forward whatever agenda that each of us have. We've got to do it in a way that doesn't alienate other Canadians. But I understand that there is anger, that there is frustration. The Prime Minister doesn't seem to see that, and he only wants respect for those he agrees with rather than those he disagrees with. And that's a major problem.
Now, Brian, there's some talk coming from Ottawa that certain politicians, like Chrystia Freeland, may need a security detail with them when they hit the road. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I had a lot of people say to me, oh, this is staged. This wasn't a real event because Chrystia Freeland doesn't have a security detail with her. First off, let me point out that this same man, and I use that term loosely because if you're going to yell at a woman like that, I think that calls your manliness into question. He also went after Pierre Poilievre recently. So this is not a staged event. Secondly, Deputy Prime Minister is not a real position. That's not to diminish Ms. Freeland. It's just to point out that this is a ceremonial title. It doesn't exist in our Constitution. It is something that some prime ministers have used, some have not. Again, it's not an attack on Ms. Freeland. It's just to say that at times we have had people given the designation of Deputy Prime Minister, and other times we haven't. Most prime ministers have not had a Deputy Prime Minister. It is a ceremonial issue. So there's no security that goes with that. Cabinet ministers don't travel with security. They travel with staff. Why don't they travel with security? Because generally speaking, we are not a dangerous country. We're not a violent country. This is not something that we need to do. And I shudder to think of the fact that we may get there one day. I hope that we don't. We've had added too many layers of security to public life already from when I first started covering it more than 20 years ago. Adding more levels, I don't think is a good thing. So, should she have security? Well, she will have it if threats continue. I can tell you that Lisa MacLeod, now former cabinet minister here in Ontario in Doug Ford's progressive conservative government, she was Minister of Community and Family Services. She was in charge of the autism file. Things got so heated that for a long time, she needed 24/7 police protection for her and her family. My point being that this is unfortunate. It happens rarely, but it is something that happens across partisan lines. Unfortunately, right now, the media narrative is that this only happens to Liberals. It only comes from Conservatives. It's not. We've got a real problem with people lashing out to people. Once upon a time, we would have said, well, Hal, I disagree with you. Now, if you disagree with someone, well, Hal, you're my enemy. That's not how we should behave as Canadians.
Yeah, let's just agree to disagree. Brian, some controversy involving the Trudeau Liberals who gave a $133,000 anti-racism contract to a man, Laith Marouf, who allegedly made vile comments about Jews, Francophones, Indigenous Canadians, even Black Americans. Our own Lethbridge MP Rachel Thomas wrote a letter to Heritage Minister Pablo Rodriguez asking why, and he's been pretty silent so far.
And the reason this is important that she asked Heritage Minister Pablo Rodriguez is because the funding came from his department. So a lot of the blame has fallen on Cabinet Minister Ahmed Hussein, who is the minister's main duty is housing. Very important issue in Canada right now with the price of housing going up absolutely everywhere. But he also was given, after the last cabinet shuffle in the fall post-election, he was given the duties of diversity and inclusion. So let me break this down for you. This grant was awarded in September 2021, which means it was going through the process. It was awarded in the middle of our election last year, but it was going through the process back when Stephen Guilbeault was Heritage Minister and Bardish Chagger was the Minister in charge of diversity and inclusion. After the election, it's already been awarded. The new minister in charge is Pablo Rodriguez at Heritage, Ahmed Hussein at Diversity and Inclusion. It seems nobody did any vetting of this guy named Laith Marouf. And the initial response from the government, and I spoke to people on background about this, and they said, look, we made the agreement with this group called the Community Media Advocacy Center in Montreal. We didn't know Laith Marouf made all these comments. Laith Marouf is CMAC. He and his wife run and control the place. They've got a board, they've got some hangers on, but they're the two main consultants and have been for years. And his cell number, his personal cell number, was posted on his personal website until recently. Here's how to contact me for media interviews. Call my mobile or WhatsApp. And it was the same number that was given out for this group. So they are one and the same. And this guy is making comments where he constantly calls pretty much all Jews Jewish white supremacists. He refers to francophones in the most horrible terms, claims that they have a very low IQ, calls Indigenous people who work with the government horrible names, calls Canada apartheid Canada, calls Justin Trudeau our apartheid PM, referred to Colin Powell, the former Secretary of, was he Secretary of State? I forget his exact position within the Bush administration. He had a couple, but he calls him the, I believe he was the Jamaican house slave for the empire. That's one of the things that I can actually say on the airwaves. Again, like the other issue, I can't say what this guy has tweeted out in public in statements. The man his views are horrific. The government gave $133,000 and said, go train broadcasters how not to be racist. I'm not going to take lessons. I've been in broadcasting for a quarter century. I'm not going to take lessons from that guy on anything.
You know, Brian, some in the media are going after Pierre Poilievre, commenting on whom he's shaking hands with, or they want him to comment on the harassment of Freeland and Grand Prairie. Why are not more of our fellow journalists holding the government to account for properly vetting and hiring people like Marouf?
Because it seems that some in the media, especially in the parliamentary gallery on Parliament Hill, where you and I have both worked, some are more intent on holding the opposition to account than the media. Look, should opposition parties be held to account for their views or for how they are criticizing the government? Absolutely, they should. Are they putting forward constructive suggestions? Are they putting forward workable suggestions? Are they putting forward crazy things? Sometimes opposition parties say crazy things. That deserves attention. But Pierre Poilievre has been asked, why aren't you speaking out against the fact that you shook hands with this guy, Jeremy Mackenzie? Jeremy Mackenzie is a guy with a group called Diagolon, which has, depending on who you listen to, either an online joke or, given what security agencies have said about them, a dangerous group with racist sympathies. I mean, some of their paraphernalia was found with the guys now charged with what happened at the border at Coots a few months ago. So yeah, I have concerns about Diagolon. Did Pierre Poilievre know who this Jeremy Mackenzie was? I wouldn't have been able to pick him out of a lineup. But the government actually hired CMAC and Laith Marouf to teach the rest of us how not to be racist. And yet, for some people in Ottawa, covering Parliament Hill, the idea that Pierre Poilievre shook hands with this guy is worse, or the fact that this guy verbally assaulted Chrystia Freeland, and that Poilievre didn't give a good enough mea culpa is more of an issue than the government hiring someone who said things that I cannot repeat on air about Jews, Blacks, Indigenous people, and Francophones. To teach us to be anti-racist. So, forgive me, Hal, but it gets me hot under the collar.
Oh, absolutely, understandably so. Brian, there's another push on the fertilizer front, but this time it has nothing to do with emissions, and it impacts our farmers. Can you explain?
This is about the issue of tariffs on imported fertilizer from Russia. Now, when you think of the amount of potash that we've got in this country, you think of the resources that we have in this country. It's a bit bizarre, but we export a lot of fertilizer and we also import a lot of fertilizer. And so we import a lot from Russia. Canada and Russia and Ukraine have many of the same minerals. Just geologically, it's worked out that way. So we're big producers of fertilizer, so are they. Sometimes it makes more sense for whatever our farmers need to import Russian fertilizer. Many of them, by the way, signed contracts before Russia invaded Ukraine. But since then, the government has imposed steep sanctions on Russian products. I have no issue with that at all. I think it's the right thing to do. I'm not sure that sending back the turbine on the Gazprom pipeline was the right thing to do. You can't say that you're going to stand with Ukraine and punish Russia on one thing, not another. So I don't have an issue with the tariffs, but a lot of the farmers have been saying, look, this is hurting us. All you're doing is punishing us and driving up the cost of food. That's not good. So, look, imposing the tariff on fertilizer may have made people who had not purchased in advance look elsewhere, look to American producers or suppliers or Canadian producers or suppliers. That's not a bad thing. Take business away from Russia. But for those who'd signed contracts, but it hadn't been delivered, they had to pay the 35%. So there's a push on to say, rebate farmers for this. And the government so far has been saying no, but the pressure is mounting. And the pressure is also mounting to make sure that if they do, that it actually ends up not in the hands of the middlemen, the importers, the retailers, but also in the hands of the actual farmers who bought the product. And that's going to be important because when you look at what the price of fertilizer did over the last year, whether you're talking bean growers, alfalfa growers, soy growers in Ontario, wheat growers, we do have some of those, tobacco growers, you're talking prairie, pulse crop farmers or wheat growers. All of this is one of their biggest inputs, and it went up depending on when you bought 2, 3, or 4 times what it was last August and September. That is an incredible price. Then you add a 35% tariff on top of that, it becomes unworkable. So I'm hoping that the government is going to look at this. My understanding is that they're trying to find a way to do it. The hope is, will they do it right? So this is a good news story for the Trudeau government. They're looking at doing it. Will they do it right is the question. And whether it's producers here in Ontario or out where you are, they've got to keep up the pressure. And as always, I say, do it politely because you get more flies with honey than with vinegar.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
The UCP will be choosing its new leader on October the 6th. Many are still on the campaign trail trying to drum up a little bit of support. We recently saw leadership hopeful Travis Taves at the Whoop Up Days parade. Now, another politician who was also at the parade was Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Newdorf, who joins us now from his home riding in his office here in Lethbridge. Nathan, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Great to be here, Hal. Thank you.
Now, you were part of the parade. Did you see all the thousands of people lining up the streets? It was an incredible turnout, wasn't it?
It was great. It was just great to see people back after a couple of years away because of the pandemic, the excitement. Little dicey on the weather that morning, but it turned out to be just a beautiful day, not too hot and no rain. And just a lot of people happy to be out and waving flags and seeing candy coming their way. It was really great.
Now, you're in Lethbridge right now, but you're also headed down to Madison, Wisconsin? What's the purpose of the trip?
That's right. Yeah, I'm going to Madison, Wisconsin as a representative for Alberta to take legislative leadership development at their Bohé Institute. And very happy to do that. There's a lot that we need to learn as legislators. This is one of the top programs in North America for developing legislators. And I'm very happy to be selected to go to this course for a week. It's going to be a full week, but really happy to learn more to serve my community and my province well.
Now, Nathan, let's chit-chat a bit about the leadership race. It's heating up once again. Many would argue that at this point, it's really a two-horse race between former Finance Minister Travis Taves and former Wildrose Party leader Danielle Smith. Now, you threw your support behind Smith. Why is that?
Well, quite simply, Hal, it's because she listens. And I believe she has a very strong focus on grassroots development, which will allow me as the representative for Lethbridge East to share the top concerns for Lethbridge more fully. I think that's what people expect. Not that I agree with every one of her policies, but I do believe that she will listen and allow me to strongly take Lethbridge positions to government and make sure that our interests are well represented there.
Some of the items Danielle Smith is campaigning on and bringing forth is the Alberta Sovereignty Act. Where do you stand on that, Nathan?
I'm actually very strongly in support of it, but I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about it. The Sovereignty Act isn't just to say no to Ottawa. What it's meant to do is protect the jurisdictional authority of Alberta. The Canadian Constitution is very clear that there are certain authorities given to the federal government and certain authorities given to the provincial government. We want to protect Alberta's provincial authority. And when Ottawa veers too far into that lane, be able to legally tell them, no, you've crossed the line. And instead of us always having to take the federal government to court when they do that, we would now have the ability to say, this crosses that jurisdictional authority protected by the Canadian Constitution, and we're not going to observe that. And I have lots of instances where the federal government has done that in recent times.
So how will that work in regards to Bill C-69, or as Jason Kenney referred to, the No More Pipelines Act?
Exactly. That would give us, instead of us having to take them to court, which we have, we won in Alberta, now the federal government has taken it to the higher Supreme Court, the tables would be turned. We would have the authority to say, under the Constitution, this is our jurisdiction. And no, we are going to go in this direction as is protected by the Canadian Constitution. If the federal government didn't like that, then they would have to take the province to court. And that would cost them money. Then they would have to defend their claims properly in the proper court of the land. So I think that needs to be more clearly understood. I've always been a strong supporter of local autonomy, and this, I believe, would further strengthen that.
What's interesting about all of this, taking, one government taking another government to court, it's all taxpayers' money at the end of the day. So taxpayers are saying, no, come on, let's figure this out. Nathan, a number of Conservatives I've chatted with are quite concerned that the UCP is not quite united anymore. What will it take to really unite the party once again?
Well, I think there's a couple things. One is we do need to have resolution on leadership. Right now, there are 8 competing voices for that spot, including our current premier and the work that he's trying to do. And 2, we need to take some time to sit down and work through those differences. I'm proud of our caucus, that we have a great breadth and diversity of viewpoints, that we have strong individuals all across the province bringing their voices to bear on issues that matter to them. Now we have to have the time to sit down under one united leader to have those conversations and work through it. We're adults. We know that we don't get everything we ask for, but we do expect to be respected, listened to, so we can bring those concerns forward, and then hopefully we can find a path that has consensus and majority. I believe we can get there, and we need a little bit of time to do that.
One of the stories we recently had on Bridge City News was how UCP leadership candidate Leila Aheer's social media accounts were hacked into. The hackers posted a lot of objectionable material that has simply devastated MLA Aheer. Have you had a chance to chat with her?
I did. I reached out to her this morning, talked with her a little bit through text, actually. She's devastated. It's horrible. It's disgusting what's happened to her. Unfortunately, it happens to too many elected leaders around the world. It needs to stop. I fully stand with her and hope that the RCMP can find out who's responsible for this and prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law.
Now, Nathan, last time we chatted, you mentioned that the province had a plan to bring more doctors to our city. 40,000 people in Lethbridge, including myself, still don't have a family physician. My doctor bailed and he went to the Netherlands. What's the latest with more doctors joining us here in the Windy City?
Well, we have very good news. To date, there have been 17 family physicians hired to come to Lethbridge and serve. 4 of them have commenced the first part of that assessment and transition. It is estimated that they will be starting this fall. Those 4, and with the further 13 beginning to come online closer towards the end of the year and into next spring. So 17 would roughly cut that number of people without family doctors in half. So we're not all the way there, but we have definitely turned a corner and we're moving in a very positive direction. We hope to continue to add roughly 2 physicians a month in that process. That would mean by hopefully next summer, we're back very close to a full complement of doctors needed in this area.
A surgeon I was chatting with recently also said that in the next little while, we'll be down to 2 gynecologists. A couple are apparently moving and other ones are retiring. That's yet another void that we have to fill here in the city.
Yeah, and that's a problem not just here in Lethbridge. There are problems amongst a number of disciplines in Alberta and right across Canada. And I think we need to take a much more global perspective on that. We need to be training more physicians here locally, not just Alberta, but in Canada. We have been importing doctors for many years, but I think now we need to turn our attention towards the next generation, some terrific youth who want to serve and practice all kinds of areas in medicine and other areas, to tell you the truth as well. And we need to make that more available and accessible to them so that we can keep them here, right where they want to grow up and live and raise their families.
Now, a number of municipalities, including here in Lethbridge, have really voiced their concerns about EMS dispatch being centralized. The province said they wanted to do so in an effort to save millions of dollars, I think around $6 million annually. A number of mayors are saying it's taking ambulances far too long to reach patients. And Nathan, as you know, time is of the essence in critical situations. Is your government looking at potentially giving the power back to municipalities?
I believe they are. They assemble what we call the Alberta EMS Provincial Advisory Committee. RJ Sigurdsson and Tracy Allard and a number of MLAs, Tanya Yao, worked on that committee, and they have brought forward recommendations to help address that. Some of it's increased funding, some of it's other measures. They're working on implementing that now. There is a strong commitment to look at that system and see how we can best manage some of these challenges, like long wait times, like ambulances being trapped in other jurisdictions as they do transfers of patients. So that's a very key file right now, and they've been working on it. They submitted recommendations. I look forward to more announcements in the months and weeks ahead.
Now, there's a push within your party to have a provincial police force. Many Albertans I've chatted with say they're quite happy with the job that the RCMP is doing right now, and implementing a new police force would be far too costly and not even as effective. Where do you stand on the issue?
Well, I do like the idea of an Alberta police force, but you're right. We need to work more closely with municipalities on what that looks like, what that will cost, who bears those costs. The province is committed to bear any additional costs. And to be perfectly clear, this has never been a question about the men and women who serve on the front lines of RCMP. This is about administration. This is about authority. This is about community policing having to go through a provincial director to a national director and back in terms of getting things done. I think provinces across Canada like to make sure that leadership line is much shorter and much closer to the ground where the boots are needed. But this transition will take time, and it will take dollars, and it will take cooperation of the province and municipalities to make that happen. But the community policing portion would be much more responsive, in my opinion, if it was governed more locally and provincially.
Driving around the city, you and I have both seen a lot of the tent encampments set up by the Civic Center, by the Soup Kitchen, and so forth. We still have an opioid crisis here, a homeless issue. How is the province really working with the city to address a lot of those problems here in Lethbridge?
We have a number of great initiatives. The municipality and police force have recently helped address that. Those tent cities have really reduced in size recently. But you're right, it's an ongoing issue of mental health and addictions issue and homelessness. We just announced 64 new beds for supportive seniors housing, which creates spots in other areas of the system to intake other individuals. We have a number of long-term beds here in Lethbridge and on the Blood Tribe that will be coming into service this fall. That will again help them. And talking to the mayor recently, he said a number of those individuals living in the tent city actually have houses and accommodations in other places. They just don't have easy access back to them. So we're working with the city to see if we can come up with a more regular, low cost or zero cost transportation system to help them get back to the homes that they actually have.
Premier Jason Kenney has pushed for an Alberta pension plan. Now, Rachel Notley and the NDP have been quite vocal, saying that they will not touch our Canada pension plan. What would be the benefit of a provincial as opposed to a federal plan, in your opinion?
It's my understanding that the savings to Alberta workers and Alberta businesses would be in the magnitude of $3 to $6 billion a year, partly because Alberta is a growing workforce, a growing economy. We have younger workers that generally get paid higher wages. So this means we're spending billions of dollars supporting other jurisdictions across the country for their retirement, not ours. If we repatriate that, that's a lot of dollars back in Albertan taxpayers' pockets and Alberta company pockets. That allows them to diversify their businesses as well as save money. We think this would be beneficial. This is something that we do want to work on. Obviously, as we just talked, those saved dollars could help Alberta pay for a police force, for instance, which we know would have additional costs. There's all kinds of things that we could do if we brought that back. I think it's something that Albertans need to consider. And I think it's something that we'll be discussing more and more as we move into the future.
Nathan, many business owners we've chatted with on Bridge City News are saying they don't have enough staff. They can't attract enough workers to come to Lethbridge. What is the province doing to really address the worker shortage?
Well, Premier Kenney just announced a cross-Canada invitation for particularly people who may be living in Vancouver and Toronto, but other areas to consider Alberta. We have lower cost of housing. We have great wages, great jobs. We have a beautiful province. From south to north, there's incredible places to recreate and enjoy our vast wildlife and nature. So we are trying to do that. We do that on an international basis as well. But I think we will also have to, like I said earlier, expand those training spots in our post-secondary institutions so that people are coming here from all across Canada, all across North America, and indeed around the world to come here to train and fall in love with our province. Then they'll end up staying.
They'll also fall in love with Waterton Lakes National Park. I go there every second weekend. Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf, thanks so much for your time today.
You bet. Thank you, Hal. Appreciate it.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.